for it to become a real Sangha Kamma. And of course, the nice thing about this is that once you know the requirements, then you can actually formulate your own Sangha Kammas exactly as you like, as long as you include those basic topics. And the basic idea is that you have to be understood. That's kind of the idea behind this. Very useful. But I want to have a look at an example of a Sangha Kamma, what it looks like, and especially for those of you who come from a non-Theravada tradition, so you can have an idea what these things look like. These are the things that are actually found in the Vinaya Pitaka, in the scriptures. So these are the kind of ordination that presumably they did all the way back to the time of the Buddha. So, so this is the Sangha Kamma example. One of the most important Sangha Kammas we have is the ordination ceremony or the ordination procedure. And this is how it begins. And this is a part of the question that we had from Venerable Karunika before. Who says the Sangha Kamma? How is a person decided? And one of the criteria is that it has to be a competent and capable monk or nun who informs the Sangha. The information here means that it's the person who is speaking and who is making the suggestion. Not just that, but as I mentioned before, if you're going to speak on the Vinaya or the Dhamma, or you're going to give answers, you actually have to be authorized first of all. That authorization usually happens, the senior monk or senior nun authorizes you, or authorization can also happen through the Sangha itself. And there are examples of how this is done, found in the Vinaya, found specifically in the Uposatha Khandaka. The Khandakas, 22 chapters in the Vinaya. The second one is the Uposatha Khandaka, which is the Khandaka on the observance day, when we do the Patimokkha ceremony and all of that. And in there you find lots of tiny rules on Sangha Kamma. In fact, if you want to understand Sangha Kamma well, really the best place to do that is in the Uposatha Khandaka. I think the reason for that is because the Uposatha is probably the Sangha Kamma that came first. When the monks had recently been established, the monastic community, one of the first things the Buddha did, I think, maybe before the ordination ceremony, I'm not sure, but quite possibly, was the Uposatha ceremony, where you recite your rules and you kind of give a Dhamma talk to the lay community and these kind of things. And because it is the first one, that is where you find all the little rules on how that what validates and what invalidates the Uposatha Sangha Kamma. And so I take it that all the rules that you find in the Uposatha Khandaka, because they're talking about the very beginning of the Sangha, those rules are actually, as far as I'm concerned, also concern all Sangha Kammas, not just the Uposatha Sangha Kamma, but all Sangha Kammas throughout. So these are kind of related to all Sangha Kamma. So that's why you go there. You find that there that you have to be authorized by the Sangha or by the senior person before you can say anything on the Vinaya and the Dhamma. And that's where you get these rules from in this context as well, even though the context is slightly different. So competent, capable monk or nun should inform the Sangha. And this is what they say. So this is the actual Sangha Kamma. Please, Venerables, I ask the Sangha to listen. So-and-so is seeking the full ordination with Venerable so-and-so. He is free from obstructions and his ball and robes are complete. So-and-so is asking the Sangha for the full ordination with so-and-so as his preceptor. If it seems appropriate to the Sangha should give the full ordination to so-and-so with so-and-so as his preceptor. This is the motion. So we're going to dissect this in a second to look at make sure all the various parts are there, but you can probably get some idea already what is going on there. And then we have the announcement. So we have the motion, which is the nyati, and the announcement, which is the anusavana in Pali, sometimes called kamavacha, but usually anusavana. These words are used a little bit mixed up together. So this is the announcement. So the motion, the suggestion has been given to the Sangha, and this is then what is announced. Very similar to the motion. Please, Venerables, ask the Sangha to listen. So-and-so is seeking the full ordination with Venerable so-and-so. He is free from obstructions and his ball and robes are complete. So-and-so is asking the Sangha for the full ordination with so-and-so as his preceptor. The Sangha gives the full ordination to so-and-so with so-and-so as his preceptor. Any monk or nun who approves of giving the full ordination to so-and-so with so-and-so as his preceptor should remain silent. Any monk or nun who does not approve should speak up. So very similar to the previous one, and the last part there is really the difference. This is why it's called the announcement, because you are making the announcement to the Sangha, and that is where you have the opportunity to object to what is happening here. Because this is an ordination ceremony, you do this for a second time, and you do it for a third time, and then after the third time, if no one objects, then you announce that the person has been ordained, and that is how the Sangha Karma comes to an end. So let's look at some of the details of this, right? So I'm going to go through them in detail now, so just to discuss it very briefly. So it starts off by saying, please, Venerables, I ask the Sangha to listen. Sunatu me bante sango is the Pali phrase there. And this is a standard phrase that you see in all Sangha Karma. And the idea here, of course, is that you're here addressing the Sangha. This is one of the criteria we saw before. You have to mention the Sangha so everyone is aware that this is a Sangha making this decision. So you are addressing the Sangha. Please, Sangha, listen. This is a motion that I'm going to propose for you. So this is a critical part, and this is why it occurs in every Sangha Karma. And this is ideally should be there either in this way or in some other way, whereby the Sangha understands this is the Sangha that this concerns. So-and-so is seeking the full ordination with Venerable so-and-so. So here you have what we talked about before, the subject of the Sangha Karma. So-and-so is the subject. So that would be, if you, during the ceremony, that would be the name that you just put in there. So the name has to be present. And then you have the full ordination is mentioned. I take that to be part of so-and-so. Full ordination is part of the object, so people know what's going on. And then you have with Venerable so-and-so, and the idea that I haven't made it green, because I made it green further down, but that is also part of this. This is the Pugala. We saw the Vattu, which is here the so-and-so, the Vattu, that's the object. And then you have the Pugala, which is the full ordination, and you have the Sangha, the three things that have to be mentioned. Okay, I'm not sure if I got that right. But anyway, you get the idea, I'm sure. He is free from obstructions, and his ball and robes are complete. It is not entirely clear whether this is a necessary part of the ordination or not. Could maybe be argued that it's part of the object. There's a person who is free of obstructions, and balls and robe are complete. But personally, I don't think it's fully required. Even if you leave this out, it is actually still fine, as long as you know who the person is, because then you can always check later on, or you can always make sure that the obstructions are there. As long as you know the person, that is the most important point. Then you can always make adjustments later if required. So-and-so is asking the Sangha for the full ordination with so-and-so as his preceptor. This is the other thing you have to have as part of the Sangha Karma, because the Pugala, the person, matters. So you have the preceptor, the Pugala, with the person who's ordaining, and you have the Sangha, the three things. If it seems appropriate to the Sangha should give the full ordination to so-and-so with so-and-so as his preceptor. So again, you are addressing this to the Sangha is making the decision. This is kind of the point here. This is the motion. You have to state that this is the motion. This is the Nyati, because you want to make sure these things are done in the right sequence. So you state that. I'm just trying to point out that these criteria, that we talked about before, they are fulfilled in the actual Sangha Karma that we are dealing with. Then we have the announcement that I showed before. It goes like this. We saw that before. And then you have the last part, which is special to the announcement. Any monk or nun who approves should remain silent. This is what we talked about at the very beginning, where I said that it is not, you don't actually voice, you don't agree to things, but you don't object. That is how Sangha Karma works. So if you approve, you just remain silent. No need to say anything here. That's that part. That's obviously a fundamental part of Sangha Karma. Any monk who does not approve should speak up. So if you don't approve, that's when you have to voice your disapproval there. These are also kind of fundamental parts of this. So that was just to show you what this looks like in practice, and so you have some idea. And that enables us to produce our own Sangha Kamma statements. That's kind of the point with this. So if you have some Sangha Kamma that does not have a prescribed format in the Vinaya, or we don't necessarily even have to follow those prescribed formats as long as we get it roughly right. There is a tendency in the Pali commentaries to say that you have to get the wording exactly right. And if you make tiny mistakes, then the Sangha Kamma is not valid. And there are some very absurd consequences of this kind of idea. And one of them is, I don't know, I've probably mentioned this before, but there was in Sri Lanka, they were arguing that, well, all ordinations in Burma are invalid because Burmese pronunciation in Pali is so different that it actually breaks the pronunciation standards in the Vinaya. And because it breaks the pronunciation standards, well, in Burma, everything is invalid. There's no monks at all in Burma. They're just... That's kind of taking it too far. And this here is actually a much more reasonable standard for what is required, as long as we understand what is going on. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. So we can now please take any questions or comments or whatever you like.
I'll just take the mic so you can read out.
Yeah.
There's some questions sent through from nuns at Santi on Ajahn.
Yo.
Okay, the first question here from the Venerables at Santi is, how do you know what kind of decisions need a Sangha Kamma?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and I think there isn't any kind of absolute answer to that. But obviously, anytime the monastics come together and they want to decide on something, that's obviously called a Sangha Kamma by definition. So the question then is, when can you... I think the general idea is that if there is anything that affects the whole monastic community, then it should be a Sangha Kamma by the Sangha. And only if something affects only individuals should it be done individually. That's kind of the general idea. So you can't, you shouldn't really start building kutis on behalf of the Sangha without the Sangha agreeing, because a kuti obviously is for the whole Sangha, unless it is a kuti for you, in which case it would be different. So I think something like that. I mean, there's going to be a lot of gray areas in this kind of thing. It's not going to be always so entirely clear cut. But if you think that it will affect other Sangha members, then you should bring it up with the Sangha.
Okay, and the next question, would you like to...
Oh, just about the kuti.
Yes.
Because we had that situation with someone... yeah. We had the situation in the nuns community of an individual wanting a kuti, or actually it was one of those, what do you call them? Those tiny house, the ones on wheels. And it was actually brought to the whole of the nuns community, because it does affect the community as a whole in the sense of where it was going to be put and what's the precedent, and do we want to move into having tiny homes. So it was a sort of, when we looked at a bigger picture, we decided it wasn't just about one individual person. So
yeah,
just put that out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that case, if it is, if the kuti is proposed to be placed on the land of the monastery, then of course it does affect everyone. So you can't just kind of put up your own kuti on the land of the monastery. But if you put up the kuti somewhere which is not monastery land, like in the state forest or on your private land or whatever, and you shouldn't really have private land, but it says in the state forest, then of course then you're fine, because no one is affected. But if it is on the monastery property, you absolutely have an obligation to ask the community. Yeah.
The next question here from the Venerables from Santi is, what duty issues need a Sangha karma?
What duty issues?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what it meant, but maybe you know.
I think duty issues is the Kichadikarana. Kichadikarana is the fourth type of Adikarana. Adikarana are the four things that should be settled, issues that should be settled in the Sangha. And the four issues are the dispute issues, accusation issues, offense issues, and Kichadikarana. Kichadikarana are all the Sangha karmas basically in the Vinaya. It's kind of the obligations of the Sangha to do. And so essentially, whenever it is laid down in the Vinaya, that's when you have to do the Kichadikarana. It's interesting, if you make a Sangha karma regarding a building project, what kind of Sangha karma is that? Is it a Kichadikarana? It's a good question. Not necessarily, because I don't think it's not an obligation or a duty. Kichadikarana means what should be done, and obviously ordination ceremony is something that should be done. Same thing with the Uposatha. So I think that these are don't really fit into that normal pattern. I think they kind of come as additions to that. So the question then is, well, do we have any precedent? And I will show later on that actually there is a precedent in the Vinaya for using Sangha karma also in those situations. And this is what I want to come down to. And I don't know if we need to classify these things according to where they fall within the four adhikaranas. I'm not sure if that really matters. But I think better to kind of think of whatever affects the Sangha as a whole is what we should have Sangha karmas.
Ajahn, just to provide more detail for those online, in Bodhinyana we've sometimes, well, I'm not sure about this now, we've sometimes had a Sangha karma for a store monk or for the work monk, so that might be where Santi's question is coming from. Yeah. Can you speak to that?
These are absolutely Kichadikaranas. So these are the kind of officials of the Sangha. This is actually laid down in the Vinaya, that if you have an official for the Sangha, and there are certain officials that are, I'm going to come back to this in a second actually, certain officials that are talked about in the Vinaya, but of course you can have additional officials beyond that. It's not necessarily limited to what is found in the Pitaka. So that would be a Kichadikarana. Or is it a Kichadikarana? So it kind of depends how you translate the word Kicha. It is a duty. Is it a duty? I guess it is a kind of a duty, but not an absolute duty, because you don't have to have these kind of people. So, so it certainly includes those kind of things. Please, do you want to use a microphone?
I can speak loudly.
Loudly? Okay.
So if someone, just following on from Vero Metaji's question, if somebody is then elected, say, an officer of the Sangha, and they leave for a certain amount of time, is it like then it just becomes invalidated that they are the officer of the Sangha, or is it until they're appointed? Is there anything like that?
They can. I think they can remain an officer, but what they would have to do then, they would have to probably appoint someone in their place. Like have a deputy or whatever, and probably would be good to have that deputy confirmed by the Sangha, so that there's no problem there. But so that when they come back again, automatically they take it over again. That's how we normally do things at Bodhinyana Monastery. In a Bodhinyana, usually we have the person who is an officer just kind of says, oh yeah, you take over, and that's it. So we kind of give them that conferred authority to replace, someone else to take the place.
Right now, the nuns that you had their hand raised. Did you want to try asking a question and see if the audio was clear enough, Venerable?
Can you hear me? Is it clear?
No,
it's not very clear.
Can
sorry,
you hear me, or is it not clear? Okay.
We can hear your voice, but we can't understand what you're saying.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but we can't understand.
No. Okay, then never mind. At least some of the important things in our monasteries that needs a Sangha Karma, because I don't think at Dhammasara or at Santi we are really clear about it. Apart from ordinations and katina and things like that, we hardly ever do a formal Sangha Karma. But after those years of experience, we at least, list some things so that we can actually practice this, because we study about it, but we hardly practice it. We don't know when to do it and what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you able to hear of that?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. I know what you mean, because it is a gray area. It is not at all clear exactly when one should do Sangha Karma. So it is something that we have to look at. But there is a precedent in the Vinaya, and I will show this afterwards, that Sangha Karma should not just be done in those areas that have been laid down specifically in Vinaya. There is a precedent to show that Sangha Karma should be done whenever something is relevant for the whole Sangha. And so it is a little bit grayish, but it is, I think, if you kind of go with the general idea that whenever something affects the whole Sangha, then a Sangha Karma should be done, then I think that is a kind of at least some kind of principle to decide.
So there's one more question that's been written here by the Venerables from Santi that I can read out. So it's asking or saying that sometimes if the Sangha does not know that there is going to be a Sangha Karma happening at a meeting, and if they do not know what it is about, then there is sometimes not enough time for the members to make a decision on whether they agree or object. So, in actual practice, how is this done at Bodhinyana?
In practice at Bodhinyana, it is normally discussed among the monks before the meeting. Usually informally, very commonly. Well, I mean, for example, if I want to bring something up, very, very often I will at least talk to Ajahn Brahmali, but I will also check with other monks and see what they feel about something. But it's not always. It's not kind of done in an official way, so as to ensure that everyone hears about it beforehand. It's kind of more informal, just to get the general feeling. So I guess the other thing that we do sometimes is that if we feel that people don't have enough time to consider something, we may postpone the decision. So we do something and then we decide that we actually haven't got enough time, or people want to consider it further, and then we postpone a Sangha Karma to a later meeting for that reason. So either way, informal discussion beforehand, or postponing to a later meeting, or if it is a small issue, you just bring it up straight away and it's decided straight away.
There has been precedents of Bodhinyana that there's been a vote and it wasn't unanimous, so then it's been delayed. So as part of living in harmony, you'd be asked to go and talk to the other side, see if you could come with a compromise. So there are examples of Sangha Karma has been delayed 2-3 times before it came back. Yeah, exactly. I will be talking to all of these things are actually part of my kind of coming later on. So, yeah. All right. Yeah.
Do you do a mixture of like one motion, one announcement, and just Apalokana stuff, or is it just all?
It's a bit random, I have to admit. We're not very structured at Bodhinyana Monastery. It's a mixture of sometimes just voting, just kind of straight vote about things, which is not really Sangha Karma. It's another kind of decision making altogether. And Apalokana Sangha Karma, sometimes we do that. It's almost like we're sitting in the Dana Sala and everyone is kind of just ask everyone informally, what do you think about this? And okay, it's done. I'm not sure if that is proper Apalokana, because Apalokana also needs to meet the requirements of Sangha Karma. It should really be unanimous and these kind of things. So sometimes it's a bit sort of random. So, I have to admit that we are not very, even at Bodhinyana Monastery, we're not very kind of consistent about these things. And it is a bit sort of But yeah, and one of the reasons I think is because we have been part of the Thai tradition for a long time, and this is not really done in the Thai tradition. So we're still kind of a little bit stuck in that past habits of doing things in a certain way. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So what should we do now?
Keep going.
Keep going? Okay. Yeah, we had the idea of having some breakout sessions. Should we have that, or should we not have breakout sessions, or should we?
I think breakout sessions are great. I mean,
Yeah.
just logistically, we ordered tea for 2:00 if that meets with your schedule.
Oh, so we have a breakout session at 2:00, yeah, with the tea?
No, I've arranged a tea break.
Yeah.
So breakout session, one breakout session now. There's a tea break at 2:00 if you'd like to take it. And another breakout session was announced for later today.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So when should we have the breakout session? I don't know. Do people want to do it now? Because now it's kind of after the lunch. Good time to have a breakout session. Yeah. Either you fall asleep or you talk. Really, that's kind of the two options. Yeah.
Can you share the title, or would you like us to have a breakout session on?
What do people want to have a breakout session on? Does anyone have any ideas?
I circulated the ones that you sent.
Yeah.
So,
Can you remind us?
Well, what I wrote, and I mean, this is just, I just kind of came up with something on the spot. I don't really, whatever really. But this is what I had. What are the specific problems within Buddhist monasticism? And can they be resolved by a more decentralized structure and delegation of authority? So what are specific problems that you can think of and that you know about? And the question is whether they can be addressed by this kind of decentralized structure and delegation of authority that we're talking about here. Is that a topic that is useful, or? Choki, do you have any ideas?
No, I don't.
No? Okay.
if we took the context of what you spoke of this morning, then there's potential structures, and the argument was that the Act was put in place to try and put more structure in place, I guess. So if you take that question as a broad framework, we could talk about the fact in a breakout room here, we could perhaps put everybody into a breakout room online on Zoom, of how should Sangha karmas be applied to helping structure, yeah? And does it help structure?
That was my second question, really, but anyway,
Sorry?
that was a bit like my second question, my second kind of breakout session.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah.
I was trying to head back to you first.
Yeah.
You could just say a bit more about applying what you taught us in this morning to the breakout session that you'd like us to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
So we put one group over here in a big circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long would you allow?
We can come just talk and see what happens. And if there's a lot to talk about, we can just extend it a little bit. Don't have to make it a bit short if there's not much to talk about. We can start in half an hour. Is that a good idea?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we put all the people on Zoom to one breakout room.
Yeah.
Together so they can talk.
Yeah.
And then we could hear back from them.
Yeah.
At the end.
Okay. Can you want to repeat the question that you're suggesting? Yeah.
Doesn't it mess with your second one? I'm just trying to show respect.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we not even get to a second one. We just do that one now, and then we'll see what happens. So, yeah.
So the nuns from Santi had their virtual hand raised and would like to say something, I think.
Okay, let them speak. Yeah. Ooh. What happened?
Ajahn, can you hear me?
We hear it too loud.
Can you hear us?
Can you please reduce it a bit? What happened?
Okay. I also have a suggestion.
Okay.
Is it clear?
Yes, I think so. I think it's
Okay. In a breakout session, I would also like to really discuss some of the practical, important thinks that we should use Sangha Karma. Like you were saying, even at Bodhinyana, that not done properly, but at least with the nuns we can start. So that we are very full to just an idea to think, shouldn't there Sangha Karma? Did you hear it?
Not really. It's really bad connection. I'm not sure what's happening.
Ajahn, can you? Oh, okay. I'm typing.
Let me see if I can repeat back to you. So I think I got a sense. So perhaps you can put a hand up if I get it right. So you're saying in the breakout session that you're in online, you'd like to discuss how Sangha Karmas should be set up, what they should be used for. Is that correct? You're muted, I think. Is that a yes? I can't.
You have to unmute. You have to unmute that.
You're shaking it. You're muted.
No.
Okay.
So could you just type it in the text box? It will take us.
No.
So
yeah. Can we talk about what things need to I have done that. Chat. Look at the chat.
What things in Sangha Karma? Okay, that's easy. Yeah.
Can we talk about what things need a Sangha Karma?
Yeah. Suddenly this became very loud. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay. Okay, that's a good idea. I think that's a nice one. It's a simple and straightforward topic. Yeah. So, what other things? Okay.
So we go into breakout rooms. We'll set one up over there, and half an hour, and then come back to you and discuss. Yeah. What we found.
Yeah.
Okay. John.
I don't know the answer there, and I think they're asking for the answer. She did say those who discussed it with her.
I think that's a breakout question. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, they will discuss about that. They will kind of brainstorm a bit. Yeah, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. There isn't any answer very often. It's just you have to discuss the matters. Yeah. Okay.
Some chairs up over there.
Do you have a secretary to type in your replies, or do you just want to? What am I supposed to do then, Mehmet? I can have a break. All right, great. That's my breakout. Okay, excellent. That's a nice idea.
Yeah, that's what I was checking, yeah.
No, but they have Santi and then they have the Masala.
It's online as well, so put them all into one virtual.
No, so they can just stay there. We'll just turn them off from here.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. That's true.
There's a message from the nuns at Santi asking to discuss like with you, Ajahn Brahmali. Should I just say you're not? Okay. Do you want to be involved in it?
I guess I can. Yeah. Okay. So they want me to be on the
Yeah. We're asking if they can have you part of the discussion. Yeah.
How do you get to this?
Yeah, sure.
I should go to some other location. Then I'll go over to the dining hall. I can go to the dining hall.
I can always I can send you a link if you like Ajahn Brahmali.
It would be.
Yeah, sure.
I'll be down my campus.
Okay. Take care of it.
those that are unaware, and one of the folks broke up things, we had some presentation and then discussion. So to bring out issues and then respond to that in the next session. I'll just get my master's section.
I think Venerable Rada wanted to take care of it.
Okay, that was good. Where will you be? Like over to the Dharmasala? I'll go to Dharmasala. The kitchen. Smells so good with aircon.
So did everybody understand the presentation this morning and what was trying to be conveyed about Sangha Karma and the history? Yeah. So the second question, which is now being revised, which would say what things require a Sangha Karma as far as and use the subtext of the original question, which was, if you apply the Sangha Karma, does that make things easier for your monastery, or gives more structure to the things that you need to think? Sorry, gives more structure to those things that need structure. So I'll give an example for us. So we're about 20 monastics almost regularly, and there needs to be a work period that is kind of highly specified at the beginning of each day. So we're finishing off the building of 6 kutis, we're building a large evolution rock, we would be putting this conference together. So you have to specify what ones do each things. There's a Sangha Karma every time there's a need to change the work monk, who also picks up the administration of, okay, we call it driving, but it says, I've got to get that person to hospital, I arrange for that person to have their medical test and that. So it's considered a kind of major role in the harmonious running of the monastery. So very clear to me over the 3.5 years I've been in Rhodes that they never let that position be relinquished without there being a Sangha Karma of who that person is and whether they're happy to do it as opposed to it being forced on them.
I can just add from my experience at Conversity Nuns Community as well. I guess there's a similar in that there are specific roles. Some of them are ongoing roles, and some of them might be, as you say, a particular project. So the ongoing roles would be like organising the maintenance, not that you're doing it, but what and then not that you're doing it, but the garden No, we don't. We have garden, maintenance, stores, water systems. Oh yeah, there's water systems at my librarian. We don't worry about library. But anyway, it's similar. I think there are certain roles that like that, and like I say, I guess there. Yesterday we have a monthly meeting anyway, so then generally would go out, and so people would know what's coming up at that meeting. I mean, we're no fault when somebody's left, we all know, oh, we've been talking about it, and so that's already all discussed to some extent.
You can set me up on that one. Okay. I don't use this one. No? Okay. All right then.
So I think having the unity and having that process take longer to reach that.
Okay.
Can you,
I can see you.
Can you hear us?
Yeah,
but you can hear. Can you hear us? Can you hear?
I can hear sound, but yeah, I can hear you reasonably well. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. That's good.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
We need to do Sangha Karma in 5 English. I can hear you. Yeah. Yeah. Can we do Sangha Karma in Pali or English?
Yeah. Okay, this is the. I can hear you. Okay, so this is going to be interesting. We'll see what happens. Can you do it in Pali or English? I think it can be done. Personally, I think it can be done in English. I don't think there's any problem with that at all. In fact, I think that the only reasonable way, I think it's actually preferable to do it in English, because the whole point of Sangha Karma is to make an informed decision. You want to make a decision about where everyone understands what is happening. You want to make a decision that you know who the candidate is of the Upajjhaya is. If you have no idea what's going on and you can't understand the language, it's kind of counterproductive. It's exactly the same thing with the Patimokkha. The Patimokkha is a Nyati Kamma, it's a Sangha Kamma as well. If you can't understand the rules of the Patimokkha that you are chanting, then it's kind of pointless, you know what I mean? So I think that it should be done in English. I don't think it's preferable to do it in English. I think actually English is the right way to do it. That's what I think. So, but
like if we went in the not everything is given. You said it's hard to know what needs a Sangha Karma, but let's say we come up when we are doing something, you need the Sangha Karma. How do we formulate the notion about?
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing. You don't have to. I think. First of all, you have to decide what kind of Sangha Karma you're doing. Is it going to be a Nyati Dutya Karma? In other words, Nyati Dutya is a motion and one announcement Karma. Or is it going to be Apalokana Karma? You have to decide what kind of Sangha Karma you want to do. And I think in many cases in the present day, I think in most monasteries, if they do anything like this, then Apalokana Karma might be the best way to go, because it's very informal, and that means that you are less likely to make a mistake. If you look at the criteria we just looked at that makes a motion or announcement allowable or not, that is only for a motion and an announcement. And an Apalokana Karma, it is not even clear whether there is a motion or announcement. It is a much more informal kind of Sangha Karma. So I think for the Apalokana Karma, all that really matters is that you have a clarity about what is being said, and as long as people understand what is being said, and I think it's that is kind of the satisfactory thing. But I think in general, if you include those things that were discussed and that were part in the Parivara about what makes an allowable Sangha Karma, the person, the subject, the Sangha, include that, then I think generally speaking, you are on kind of good grounds, I would say here. Just follow those
how
principles.
How do you decide whether something needs a Apalokana karma or an Natidutiya karma?
I would. Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you decide that. I don't really know. I don't think there is any clear indications in the Vinaya for how you decide. I think that the Apalokana karma was actually very rare at the time of the Buddha. It is barely mentioned at all in the Vinaya. It seems to be quite unusual. It looks like almost all Sangha karmas were Natidutiya karmas. But so I guess it has to do with the importance, I suppose, of the Sangha karma. And I would guess that a lot of Sangha karmas, especially if they are of a minor matter, can be done through Apalokana. So maybe, a dividing line might be something like, actually you can maybe even decide that dividing line within the monastery. You can decide whether, for example, if it is about spending money, for example, over a certain amount, then you do a Natidutiya karma, to say goodbye to Bhikkhu Bodhi. So that could be said to be a Natidutiya karma. Yeah, you can make those rules up. So if there's a spending issue, a large issue, or if it is about, a building project over a certain value or whatever, then you make it more formal because it is a more important decision and you want to make sure that, everyone really understands what is going on. But because there isn't any rules for this, I think these are rules that you can make up in your own monastery. Yeah.
So even if it is an Natidutiya karma, we just simply write in a very clear and precise manner what is it we are going to do and make that motion, and that would be valid.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
It's a delay. Yeah. And really, what I was thinking, because we study this for so long, and we discuss this so long, but we never apply them fully. In most occasions, as you were saying, you were at Vinaya. But it would be nice from living monastic life for some time and knowing and understand things that happen and identify some of the important things that may be good to do as a proper Sangha karma, at least between some of our monasteries, and then do it. What do you think?
I don't think anything about that because I can't understand you. Maybe what we can do, can we turn off the cameras, Venerable? Because it might give us a bit more bandwidth to hear the sound. So will that be all right? I've just stopped my video. Yeah.
I have done.
Okay.
Can you?
Or you want to type?
Can you hear us now? Ajahn?
I think maybe try one more time and see if I can
hear you. Can you hear us now?
Sort of.
Can you hear us now, Ajahn? Okay.
Venerable, would you like to?
I don't know. I was just saying, is it also come at least our thing? Yeah.
I can hear something, but not very clearly. Yeah.
Okay. I will write to the chat. Yeah. I think chatting.
What?
I can. She's going to type into the chat.
Okay. It's terrible. Is it here? The problem is? Or?
No.
Can we come up with a list of things that need Sangha Karma based on our experience in the monastery? Okay, Venerables, can we come up with a list of things? First of all, I agree with you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, good. Okay. So what is the point of discussing these rules if we're not practicing them? I think the first point is often in discussion. You have to start somewhere. So first of all, you have to know about their existence. You have to know that they were used by the Buddha. And then we take it from there. It's the same thing at Bodhinyana Monastery. Originally, we didn't do any proper Sangha Kammas at all, apart from the traditional Sangha Kammas, the ordination or whatever. But then gradually we have been using it more and more. Yeah. So first of all, you have to know about the Sangha Kammas. You have to know how they were used, and then you can start using them. So I agree. So we discuss them with the purpose of moving towards using them more. When it comes to the idea of coming up with a list of things that need Sangha Kamma based on our experience in the monastery, I think you can do that. But I think if you do, you have to remember that it's always needs to be a practical list. It needs to, not practical, I mean a flexible list, what I mean to say. It has to be a list whereby you can add new things or even delete things from the list over time. It shouldn't be any kind of final list, but you could say, we need Sangha Kamma, about kind of, if someone wants to bring up a new rule, for example, that everyone should keep in the Dana Sala, for example, then it should definitely be a Sangha Kamma. Everyone should have a chance to talk about that kind of rule. Yeah. If there was a new ruling, it shouldn't be something laid down by the abbot. Or if there is a project in the monastery, and decisions about projects, what we should do, whether we should kind of change something major in the monastery or whatever, then it should also be Sangha Kamma. So basically, if you start off with a general idea that anything that affects the Sangha as a whole should be Sangha Kamma, I think you have a very good guidance right there. Okay, so we have been discussing now for decades. That's right. That's usually how it goes. A lot of the time it ends up with discussion and no real, not so much action. So what you have to do is you have to have a Sangha meeting about this particular issue, right? You have to have a Sangha meeting about using Sangha Kamma. That's what you really need to do. And you have to sit down and you have to talk it through and you have to get everyone to agree that from now on we're going to use the Sangha Kamma in our monastery more. And you have to set down some ground rules or whatever for how to do that. And then you have an opportunity to move forward. So you probably need a meeting. So that is what I would say. So yes, we should not keep on discussing. We're discussing probably enough already. What about the core what rules? Well, that's exactly what I had in mind. Yeah, the core what rules, I think, should be something that is agreed by the Sangha. It's not something that is agreed by the abbot. This core what rules are things that affects everyone. And I think it's nice if everyone has a say. And, you come to some kind of conclusion of a good rule that everyone think is appropriate. So I think that is straight down the line an acceptable, right way of doing it. At Bodhinyana Monastery, the core what rules that we have here have not really been decided by Sangha Kamma. The rules that we have here are rules that have kind of accumulated over time. And originally, they are probably part of the rules that we use in Thailand and the monasteries over there. And then they have been changed to kind of fit the situation at Bodhinyana Monastery. But they have they been talked about by the Sangha? They have, because I remember we we had a point where rules were taken out. People would say, I don't like this rule, can we take it out? And so there was a conversation in our monastery about the core what rules. And some of them were taken out, and then it was consolidated into a whole thing. And I think it was even agreed at the Sangha meeting finally that these are the core what rules we will use. So in a sense, we have that. Although the origin of all the rules are not actually come from Sangha Kamma, the final product that we have now was decided in Sangha Kamma. So yes, so I would say partly true that that's what happened here. Yeah. So you should maybe think of doing the same, maybe. Yeah.
We actually set up a small subcommittee to look at the rules and edit them, and then publish drafts and ask for comments.
Right. Yeah.
And then we passed it all.
Yeah. It was that happened before as well. Actually, an earlier occasion, it was a similar kind of process went through here. Yeah. Are you still there, Venerable? Okay. What other things come to your mind that you think should be done as a Sangha Kamma?
Development of the property.
Yeah, I could have sort of mentioned that already, but yeah, certainly development of the property, new buildings, anything on the property, because that affects everyone. What are other things?
Spoke about ordination.
Sure, ordination, of course. Yeah, that's
vehicles.
Yeah, anything which is the property of the Sangha, including the physical real estate, but also any other property which belongs to the Sangha or belongs to the Buddhist society, really, because it belongs to the Buddhist society, but it's considered Sangha property. Yeah. So, giving up vehicles, selling vehicles, those kind of issues. People coming to the monastery sometimes brought up, who should we take in? Should we, if, for example, if you want even a new anagarika, it can be brought up at Sangha meetings. Any kind of ordination, even ordination to become a novice is often brought up. Ordination to become an anagarika is brought up in Sangha meetings. How do you do the Avalokana Kamma? There is very little information. There is very little information about Avalokana Kamma in the Vinaya, because it is very marginal in the Vinaya. It is only mentioned a few times in the entire Vinaya Pitaka. So I would say that I might have to look it up to see what the requirements are, but I would say that they should be similar to the requirements for the other Vinaya. We can't go too far away from that, because so it should be unanimous. Everyone should be there. It should be there. I don't know the quorum. Is there a quorum? I guess there is a quorum as well. And I guess that you need to touch on the subject. So I would say that basically the requirements are the same. The only difference would be that it's there is no motion and announcement. It's just a kind of straight kind of reply from the Sangha that is there, and just kind of get everyone permission. I think that's really what it is. So it is usually very informal in most monasteries, Avalokana Kammas, and probably it should be formalized a bit more to make sure that you don't get bad decisions being done, I would say. I wonder what the Parivara has about Avalokana Kamma. I wonder whether I can look it up straight away. Let me see what the Parivara has to say here. So, what was the... here we are. Okay. This is there. Okay, so I'm just going into Sutta Central, and I'm going to check the legal topics. Okay, going to the Parivara. Where what do you do when one stubborn monastic objects to the decision of the Sangha? Yes, these are exactly the interesting points. I know what you mean there. But what you do, I think actually it's a good exercise. I think the idea of compromise, I think, is actually a very important idea, and we should all learn to compromise that. And usually, if there's a stubborn monastic, maybe they have a point. Sometimes it's very hard to say. So you need to find some kind of. Sometimes you need to find a middle ground. Yeah, you need to, and then you have. Yeah. We have some stubborn monastics in Bodhinana Monastery as well. I wanted to talk about that actually. And normally what we do is that first of all, we ask, what are your problems? Well, how would you like to change this so that you become acceptable to you? And then if that doesn't work, then eventually what we ask, and this is the advantage of having someone like Ajahn Brahmali, who has a lot of authority, is that we say, well, are you happy to go with the majority? And because the majority wants to do it, are you okay with that? And then normally, they say, yes, I'm happy to go with the majority. And that, I think, is a nice way of putting it, because sometimes if people realize they are the odd one out, then they kind of give up their view and they come on board. That's kind of a standard way of doing it. All of these things, by the way, are coming up. But but the Apalokana issue is an interesting one. If a monastic accidentally damages something belonging to the Sangha, how should he or she make up that damage? Because we cannot handle money. You don't have to make it up, right? No need to make it up. If you damage something, then you damage something, and then the monastery pays for it, and whatever. You no need to do anything at all. So you can, because you are just using the property, so you're fine. So Apalokana Kammas. Let's see what happens when I type that in there. Oh, okay.
I can almost hear you, but not quite.
Okay, yeah, we can't hear you anymore now. We just heard you, but now you're gone, disappeared.
Hear us now, Ajahn? Can you hear us?
I can hear you, sort of.
Okay, Venerable Upeka has a question. Venerable Upeka is going to ask.
Okay.
Okay, Ajahn.
Hello.
I just like, in theory, it is nice for everybody to have an opinion, but if you are new to monastic life or new to that monastery, sometimes you don't have the perspective of someone who has been there longer. So then you have this sort of, equal opportunity, but actually not equal knowledge, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and this is one of the problems of Sangha Kamma. So it is important that people understand their place as well. People understand that there is something, seniority actually matters, because the experience and understanding of senior monastics often is very valuable. And you can see that in a monastery like ours, where someone like Ajahn Brahm has tremendous experience, both in terms of insight and meditation, but also in terms of just monastic life in general. And what you find in our monastery is that someone like Ajahn Brahm has a lot of natural authority. And people tend to accept what he says simply because of his authority. And that is perfectly acceptable. And it's a very important part of monastic life. So it is okay. It is okay to remind junior members sometimes that, don't be humble, right? And understand that don't kind of go too far. So that kind of balance is an important balance. And I was actually going to talk about that afterwards, because it's part of my slides as well. So it is knowing when to give in and when to press your case is actually a very important balance in monastic life. So you're very right. And that can be tricky if there are people who don't have enough wisdom to know that balance. Okay, so dear Ajahn, this is from NBN Nand. Okay, to everyone. Okay. Anyway, so number one, the building and development of the monastery is undertaken by the committee, even with Sangha participation effort. 2, the expenses budget set by the treasurer. Do these need Sangha Kamma? Well, the point there is that, remember, the Sangha certainly has to agree to the actual building. The building is happening on Sangha land, yeah? So the Sangha has to agree that this is going to be done. The committee can't just build on the Sangha land and say, yeah, we're going to build here. Who cares about the monastics? That would be really, really bad. So the Sangha has to agree. But the question then is, what is the understanding when you make that Sangha Kamma? And the understanding can be that the actual building work is done by the committee. The committee decides, yeah? And because that is the understanding when you accept this, then you go ahead on that basis. And if there is no understanding between the Sangha and the committee, well, then the committee will then do what it thinks is right. And if the Sangha disagrees, well, the Sangha will then say, well, hold on a second, and let's kind of talk about this first. But this is what I mean by delegated authority. Yeah, you agree to do a development, and then you delegate the actual execution of the development to a particular person or a particular institution, and they become responsible. So like Venerable Mudita, for example, the builder everywhere where he goes. I'm not sure if you are there, Mudita, but then you get the delegated authority, right? And you get told, well, okay, you do this, and then you follow the process. And the same thing we have here. We have kind of people who are in charge of different projects, and they basically have the delegated authority to do what they think is right. Okay, thanks for that face. And they have the delegate authority to do what they think is right. Sometimes they will come to the Sangha, they will come to Ajahn Brahm or whoever to ask questions because they feel unsure. And of course, that's good. But generally speaking, they don't have the delegation of authority. So from Venerable Karunika, we have, how much should the Sangha involve with making the constitution of the organization? And would Sangha Kamma fully apply? Okay, apply. All right. How do you know it's apply?
It's auto-correct.
It's a standard auto-correct, is it? Apply in the situation. Okay, apply. Right. Okay. I was wondering, fully. Gee, this is a very interesting language. Yes, I think the Sangha should be involved in constitutions, yeah, because these are very important things. It depends a little bit on the circumstances, yeah, because constitutions are, like for the BSWA, for example, the constitution is for the lay part of the BSWA, but also for the monastic part. And for the monastic part, I think it is important that the monastic community is involved in deciding how that works. So otherwise, you have a problem, yeah. And actually, I'm involved right now in writing a constitution for a monastery in Poland, and it's really complicated. I'm trying to kind of figure out what to do. But my main idea there is to minimize the involvement of the monks. That's kind of my main idea. So kind of really pull back as much as we can, because I see how easy it is to be overwhelmed by work and how this is happening with Ajahn Brahm and all that kind of stuff. But yes, I think it is important for the Sangha to be involved, especially when changes are made that apply to the Sangha, that are important for Sangha matters. So the answer, I think, is yes. Venerable, I think I should go back now to the main room, otherwise they're gonna get upset. So anyway, good luck with all of this. And maybe a decade or two down the track, we'll have some Sangha Karma being done by our local Sanghas. Yeah, we don't have any expectations. Okay, bye.
Poland committee puts in a clause that the executive committee shall appoint the abbots.
I'm not going to go there if that happens. I'm going to. Ajahn Brahm had some good ideas yesterday, actually.
Go. Actually, we don't have to put our image for reception. Also can sit. I brought a mirror to everyone like this. Can you please move your mic?
Ajahn, I think it would be helpful. Can everybody hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
If we could just share for a few minutes what goes on at Bodhinyana.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
I may be biased, but the community meetings being held regularly every 2 weeks, allows a sense of saying what's important, what's not important.
Yeah.
And the senior monastics may not be aware how somebody's traveling or that there is an issue. So certainly when you're a junior monastic, you are conscious of, is this the right place, to bring it up? So if you could say something about that, and I think the second thing then to share for the benefit of the nuns is whether you see a hierarchy to Sangha karmas. So we don't do a Sangha karma for lots of things. The most important one is probably people coming into the monastery to be monastics, and we defer some of that to the guest monk and Ajahn Brahmali. So two things, the importance of the community meetings to facilitate harmony and then set Sangha karmas if need be, and then whether you see there's a hierarchy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, sure. So,
we're just going through the questions.
Yeah. That's fine. We can just, right. Yeah, so the way that we do things at Bodhinyana is we have community meetings every fortnight in connection with the Patimokkha ceremony. And if you read the Vinaya, it seems to have been quite a common occurrence also back to the time of the Buddha, because very often they would give the parisuddhi. The parisuddhi is the purity. So let's say that you cannot come to the Patimokkha, you give your parisuddhi, but you also give your chanda at the same time. Yeah. So in other words, the idea is that because you give both, it means that the implication is that you are both going to Patimokkha and you're doing Sangha Kamma. Otherwise, you wouldn't be giving both. So this seems to have been something that was done all the way back to the time of the Buddha, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, in those days, you had very large semas, so it would be quite arduous to come all the way together to the community hall. They had community hall in those days as well. They were called uposatagaras. And uposatagara literally means uposata house. Agara is a house. They would come together from this large property, and then they would do both. So we are following that tradition really at Bodhinyana Monastery, and it's a very useful thing to do. And the way it works in practice is that first every monk has a say. Yeah. So it starts with Ajahn Brahmali. Ajahn Brahmali puts forward whatever he has to talk about, and then Ajahn Brahmali passes the word down in order of seniority to all the monastics. Every monastic has the opportunity to say something, including the novices at the meeting. And so what Ajahn Brahmali will often do, if there are issues that need to be dealt with, and he is the one who is aware of any larger issues like a sale of a car, getting rid of a car, or some business that we have with the Buddha Society, who is going to represent the Sangha towards the Buddha Society. Is there an officer that needs to be? Actually, he doesn't do much about officers in the Sangha, and so he will then bring that up. And then when he brings it up, then the way that we do Sangha Kamma is I would normally come up with a particular phrasing. I would say, the Sangha at Bodhinyana Buddha's monastery decides to get rid of car A, car X, whatever it is. And then I read out that statement, and then we ask the Sangha, is everyone happy with this? Ideally, we should say, does anyone object to this? That's what we really should say. But we're not always 100% consistent on how we phrase that. And then if no one objects, it passes through. And then we have a Sangha Kamma book at our monastery, and those Sangha Kammas that are passed in this way, they get written into that book. Yeah. And so that is kind of an important part of it. And then there are Sangha Kammas that are not considered important enough to be written into a book. So they will just be agreed at the meeting because they're not that significant, maybe only for a short term or whatever. And so they just agreed, and it kind of carries on like that. And then there is also, as it carries on down the line to each monastic, every monastic has the opportunity to bring up any problems they may have, any issues with the community or anything they're feeling which isn't fair or what is unreasonable, they have that chance, and so that's kind of the idea. Then sometimes people will bring up little things that are really kind of silly. I'm fed up with people hanging the towel, these towels in one place. So this happens at Bodhinyana as well, right? It's not just in other places. And please don't do that. This is kind of bad. We have banned this before. We should ban it again or whatever. So this is this life, community life, yeah. And there's many times I have wanted to say things, but I usually don't, because I realize that as human beings, and it's really my job to let go rather than to tell people off for these tiny little things. And so sometimes it comes out, because that's just human nature. So you have a chance to talk about things that is about the community. When it comes to really personal matters, however, I don't think it's usually advisable to bring it up in a community meeting, because if it's very personal, then it's probably better to bring it up with a friend or bring it up with Ajahn Hasapanya or something like that and resolve it in a different way. Because in a large community, I think these things are difficult to resolve, and you need someone to really listen to you. You can take your concerns on board if it is a really personal matter. So you do that in a different way. And then gradually maybe you can approach the community. Was that what you had in mind, Venerable Mitaji, or something more? Yeah? Okay, good. Yeah.
Would nuns like to ask anything else?
So then that keeps all that kind of figuring about where hang cows out of the work meeting?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, I think a lot of the time I would just, I think a lot of things need to be let go of.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of really the big issue. And
but then those kind of issues don't show up in your morning meetings. Is that, or do they still show up in your morning meetings?
We never talk about many of those issues. In our monastery, if there's something isn't quite right, we just turn a blind eye. We don't worry about it.
Yeah. But I mean, the stuff that's coming up in your Uposatha meetings, is it also that kind of...
We never talk about those things at work meetings.
No.
Work meeting is just one person talking, that's me, and no one else talks, and just do this, do that. And they say, aye, sir. Actually, no, it doesn't work quite like that. But so, yeah. I think you have quite a different structure at the Masada Monastery.
It's interesting to know how different people do it.
Yeah.
Any questions in the live feed?
Sorry, with the work meeting then,
does
everybody have to attend, or if you know what your job is, do you not need to attend?
Well, we have it straight after breakfast, so if you come for your breakfast, you just have it, you come, you go. Yeah, so everyone has to attend it in our situation. Yeah, because sometimes there's also announcements, and often Ajahn Brahmali says, Dhamma talk tonight, or Vinaya class tonight, or, whatever. There's some kind of announcement to be made. I was just joking when I say I just kind of tell everyone what to do. I wasn't really being entirely serious. So, yeah.
Excuse me, Ajahn Brahmali. So there's some questions that have come in from Newbury Buddhist Monastery.
Yeah.
So they're asking about, it's related to whether things are, what things like require a Sangha karma and what don't. So the first thing they're asking about is whether the building and development of a monastery undertaken by the committee, even with Sangha participation and efforts, whether that requires a Sangha karma.
We have talked about that already. I talked about that in private at the QT, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the second one is the expenses. They said expenses budget set by the treasurer. Does that require a Sangha karma?
Well, the way we do it at Bodhinyana Monastery is that we set the budget for our monastery. We are the budget masters of our monastery. And I think it is important that if it concerns the monastery, and not just the BSV is a separate account, but it's important that the monastics have a say in the budget, because we know what's going on in the monastery. So I think monastics should certainly have a say. But yeah. Whether it requires a Sangha karma, probably good to have a Sangha karma around those things, because these are important issues. That's what we try to do at Bodhinyana Monastery. Yeah.
Is there any transparency within the bhikkhu community of how the money is being spent, like a account statement or something made available?
I think if any monks wanted to see, there would be no problem.
Not something that's brought up.
It's not something that's brought up at all.
It's not tabled like a normal committee or something.
No, hasn't been so far. But I obviously would be available if anyone wanted it. I don't think anyone's interested, to be honest. Yeah.
there is a fair amount of transparency. So in recent times, we passed a Sangha Karma on the evolution block.
Yeah.
We got 3 quotes. We sent it off to the community. It exceeded the delegations. The budget was a new thing set up with the SWA committee that some community members were keen that they be there because they're considered responsible persons under the ACNC. So the budget was split up into subcategories, and the evolution block is a good example that the monastics know what the major projects are going to be probably in the next year or two. So you can't just produce a kuti like that. You have to talk to the Shire and the like. Yeah. So on one level, the big projects are definitely going forward from Bodhinyana and seeking sort of joint agreement. At the lower level, Ajahn Brahmali would hold the budget, those levels that I talked about in the breakout groups. So if somebody wants to go and get a new chainsaw, they have to go and ask him. And he might deny it. Yeah. So there are tight controls there, and that's conferred responsibility. I don't know whether you'd see that in Sangha Karma, that the authority relies with the abbot, and we're happy about that.
Yeah.
He'd say, he would know to the penny what money was in any of the bank accounts. He keeps his own records.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of an assumed conferred authority. I don't think we have officially done it, but it's kind of assumed that that's okay. Yeah.
No, it's delegated in those terms of reference.
Yeah.
And so there's a question here from the nuns at Santi asking, what do you mean by a budget for the monastery?
It just means that you have an idea of the expenditure of the next year or so. That's all it means. So you say down, this is what we expect to spend in the next year, and then make sure that you have the resources allocated. This is kind of a standard way things are done in the business world, and it is a requirement, if I understand my methodology right, it's a requirement now by the ACNC and by the government that also religious organizations have budgets so that we know what we're doing, basically. Yeah.
The nuns at Santi have just replied and said, who do you need to say it to?
Who do you need to say it to? The budget?
Yeah, that's what they said.
It's an internal document for the Buddhist Society that guides the spending of the Buddhist Society. And then if there is an external audit from an external government body like the ACNC, you can show that you have done the right thing, and you can show that you have budgeted and you are spending in accordance with that budget, because those are documents that will then be available for people to audit if they wish.
I mean, just to add to that point fairly quickly, the auditor of your accounts would want to see the budgets anyway. So you can get it's called a management letter, but it's a bit like a slap on the wrist that if you don't have the budgets and process in place, it said, this has been very hard to audit your accounts because I don't know what you were going to spend the money on and then what you actually did. So people think this is bureaucracy, but for the charities, it isn't that great in Australia. But it saves you a lot of pain if you put the processes in and then you just manage them, once in a while.
Okay. So maybe we can carry on a little bit. 2:00 is the tea, is that right? Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to tea after all that coffee. So let's see if we can make this work. Okay, so we have looked at this already. I'm going to go forward. We've seen this, we've seen that. Ding. Okay. So most of these things we have already talked about, but maybe it's useful just to recap just a little bit anyway, and just to make sure we have all of these things, a bit of clarity around these things. So if we do things according to the Sangha Karma, well, what are the reasons why we would do this? What are the benefits of doing proper Sangha Karmas? And so let's just have a look through it. We talked about most of these things already, but anyway. So we mostly avoid the problems of hierarchy because all decisions are local. Yeah, Sangha Kamma is always local because it is within the group, within the Sima, wherever you are. And so by definition, it is a local decision. And sometimes this can involve quite large groups of monks, but very commonly it will be a fairly, not a massive number of monks within the Simas. It really depends on the monastery. But, like Vinaya monastery, we have, 20-something monks, and also a few novices, maybe, I don't know sure exactly how many it is. And so you get local decisions. And one of the great things about local decisions is that it enables actions that meet the local requirements. And again, an obvious case of this is precisely the bhikkhuni ordination that we had in 2006. What are the requirements in Australia compared to maybe in Thailand? And if you want to establish Buddhism in Australia, then that idea of having a reasonable gender equality or equity is very important. And the idea for the long-term thriving of Buddhism in Australia, we would have regarded as a requirement. It is a moral imperative as well, but it's also about broader issues of whether Buddhism itself is going to prosper and benefit in that local society. So because every local monastery knows the needs of that society, of that place, you can react to those local needs. And of course, bhikkhuni ordination is a very big one, but there might be many smaller things as well that are appropriately done at the local level, rather than things being decided by a large hierarchy. So this is certainly one benefit of Sangha Kamma, local Sangha Kamma. You have no tyranny of the majority. The idea of tyranny of the majority is the idea that the majority kind of pushes things down people's throats. Minorities get tyrannized by the majority because minorities often have different requirements, different demands of a society than the majority has. It might be ethnic minorities or disabled people or whatever it is. There are always kind of subgroups within a larger group, and those subgroups may often not get heard because the majority always gets heard in a standard democracy. So the idea of having a Sangha Kamma where everyone gets heard is that you avoid the tyranny of the majority. You have to listen to all the voices that are there. Yeah, everyone gets a chance to be heard. And what that means, and we'll come back to that later on, I may not need to talk too much about that now, but what that means, of course, is that you have to have you have to be flexible with your Sangha Kammas, and you have to change the wording perhaps. You have to kind of get these things through in a way. So it means that you need to listen to the minority voice. I think that's a great exercise in kind of humility, if you like, a great exercise in preserving harmony. So that's the next one. You preserve harmony in this way because everyone gets on board. That's kind of the idea. And harmony is a fundamentally important aspect of life in a Sangha. If you don't have harmony, then basically everything starts to fall apart. Harmony is absolutely fundamental for a happy and successful monastic life. And I'll have a look at this in a second because I have a sutta reference to this particular thing. So these are very important benefits. Maybe the most important one, maybe the very last one here, that you preserve harmony, because that is where monastic life hinges on the idea of harmony. Okay, so those are the benefits. But also, let's also look at the potential drawbacks of Sangha Kamma. Everything has a drawback. And the first one is what we talked about before, the danger of decline and corruption in autonomous monasteries. If you are not, if you don't have to, if there is no one kind of looking over your shoulder and making sure that you do the right thing, it's very easy to have a decline in local monasteries. If the Sangha there is no good, if the leadership is bad, and there's plenty of examples of that in the Vinaya and the Suttas, the group of 6 monks and these kind of things. The nuns had their problem nuns as well. then it can lead to corruption and decline in autonomous monasteries. And that is certainly true. And this is one of the reasons, of course, why the Sangha hierarchy was established, to avoid this kind of corruption and decline. Another problem is the potential for gridlock. And this is very often brought up. You have one difficult person who always disagrees with everything, or something like that, and you don't get any decisions made. Yeah, no one kind of can't get an agreement because they refuse to kind of play ball or whatever. So you can kind of stop things getting done, and the monastery may kind of halt. Development stops, and nothing really happens because of that. And that is another issue we have to deal with. And the last one is an ineffective, cumbersome, and time-consuming way to make decisions. It often takes a long time, and you have to do it at the right time. You have to discuss with everyone. Everyone has to be brought on board. And I give an example of why this is cumbersome, because we have been trying to build kutis at our monastery. We have got them built now, at Hermit Cell, but we started that process about 10 years ago. And initially, there was a lot of resistance among the monastics to build these kutis. But I must admit, I felt that this is the way we have to go. So I kept on pressing it over a number of years, and eventually it happened. But this was, for me, a classic example of how you have to really be determined in what you want to do. And if you have that determination, eventually it will happen. It's just you have to kind of gradually kind of convince people that this is the right way. But and I think that was okay. It was. I mean, for me, it was. I wasn't happy about it, of course. But okay, so you give up your preference, and you just come back to it later on instead, and eventually it comes through. It's a good way of putting something above your own interests, basically. And so it was fine. So let's have a look at these three problems. I'm going to discuss them in a bit more detail, because the first one is the danger of decline and corruption in autonomous monasteries. So how do we overcome this? What can we do to avoid these things happening here? And the first solution to this is to listen to visiting monastics. We always have visiting monastics coming to our monastery. They can be invited guests, they can be random monastics coming through, or it could be that we go out and visit other monasteries elsewhere who have other ways of doing things, and we have a chance to ask them, how do you look at what we're doing here? Does what we do make sense? And actually, now that I'm talking about it, I remember this was one of the things Ajahn Brahmali would often ask visiting monastics in the early days when I was around in the early years. He would ask them, do you have any comments on how we're doing things here? Are we doing things in the right way? Are we doing things in the bad way? And usually everyone said, no, this is marvelous, this is great. So you didn't get much feedback. But at least the idea of being open to admonishment and listening is actually a very useful thing here. What do you think about what we're doing here? And I remember specifically Ajahn Brahmali doing that. But more importantly, it is part of the Vinaya Pitaka. So here you go. It may happen that a number of ignorant and incompetent monks are staying in a certain monastery. There was a lot of cases of ignorant and incompetent monastics in those days. They don't know about the observance day or the observance day procedure. This is the Uposatha Sangha Karma. Nor about the monastic code or its recitation, the Patimokkha. So they basically haven't even got a clue about the most basic things. They're really utterly clueless. Maybe clueless would be a good translation here. Clueless and incompetent monks. They're informed, We need to have some words that really kind of drive it home. They're clueless is kind of anyway. Well, I mean, here is that clueless. Anyway, so this is what happens. So you have the ignorant and incompetent monks. So what do? They all have no idea. Then a monk arrives who is learned, a master of the tradition, who is an expert on the teaching, the monastic law, and the summaries, which I've now changed to something else. But anyway, who is knowledgeable and competent, who has a sense of conscience, and who is afraid of wrongdoing and fond of the training. So this is kind of the example of the ideal monastic, Maybe not fully ideal, because sometimes it says you're an arahant, in other words, you're fully enlightened as well, but someone who is certainly living the life as best as they can. This is kind of the idea here. So what do you do if you are a bunch of incompetent, clueless fools? Then And then someone comes through who has these kind of qualities. Well, what are you supposed to do? Well, this is what you're supposed to do. Those monks should treat that learned monk with kindness. They should assist him and support him. They should attend on him with bath powder, soap, tooth cleaner, and water for rinsing the mouth. In other words, you should look after the person. Yeah, this might be a bit archaic, but you get the idea. Yeah, so in other words, you should treat a person like that as a reservoir of knowledge and understanding who can teach you something. This is the right way. So next time you get someone visiting Dhammasara with a lot of knowledge or whatever, you welcome. Yeah. What was that?
I said, with a lot of bath powder. We give them a big wash.
You give them a big wash? Okay. So, but yeah, so anyway, it gives an idea. Because very often the problem is that, if you are ignorant, you don't realize you're ignorant very often. You think you're wise. And of course, that is often the problem. And as it says in the Dhammapada, the ignorant person who knows they're ignorant, well, at least they're wise to that extent, because you understand the limitations. And this is what happens if you understand your ignorance. And then it says, if you don't look after this person this way, you commit an offense of wrong conduct. So, in other words, it is a requirement. So this is the first solution, to always kind of take on board external suggestions, even ask for those suggestions. How can we do things better? It's a very beautiful way of opening yourself to admonishment and to being open to other people's opinions. Solution number 2. So we're talking about the potential drawbacks, and solution number 2 here to this gridlock. No, what are the drawbacks we're talking about again? Anyway. Corruption of the Sangha we're talking about, exactly. Corruption of the Sangha. Yeah, gridlock comes next afterwards. Yeah. So the second one is to ensure that the lay supporters know the Dhamma and the Vinaya, so they can judge who is worthy of support. And this is quite interesting because in large parts of the Buddhist world, we say that lay people should not know the Vinaya. The Vinaya is a matter for the monastics only. But actually, the reality is that if you go back to the time of the Buddha, it seems the lay people knew the Vinaya. So here we go. This is again another quote from the suttas. And this is taken from the 22nd Khandaka. This is around not the 22nd, it was the 21st. 21st Khandaka, and this is around the first council, when all the monks came together and they wanted to recite the rules and recite the suttas. And so this is what Mahakassapa says. He says, we have training rules that relate to householders. Moreover, the householders know what is allowable for us and what is not. The discussion here is about whether they should abandon the lesser training rules or not. This is the kind of a context here. Because after the Buddha passed away, that was one of the discussions that came up. The Buddha apparently had said, you can give up the lesser training rules if you wish. And then this is the discussion they had about this. And part of that discussion, well, actually, all the householders, the lay people, they know the rules. So then what? If we abolish the lesser training rules, some people would say, the ascetic Gautama laid down training rules for his disciples until the time of his death, but they practice the training rules only as long as the teacher is alive. And you can see that happening, right? As soon as the boss is gone, now the party begins. No more rules. Enjoy yourselves and don't practice those rules. So you can see that happening here. And so, but the point here is that they knew the training rules of the monastics, And so there's nothing wrong with that. And I think actually the modern idea sometimes found in many places around the world that lay people should not know the Vinaya and the rules actually is misplaced. It should be the other way around, because that enables the lay people to support those who are worthy of support and withdraw from those people who are dodgy. And we have seen already at the beginning how much corruption there is in the Buddhist world. It's very useful for lay people to be able to kind of channel their support where it is really to those people who are worthy of it. And then we can sustain Buddhism in the long run. So this is it's a very powerful way of avoiding the corruption of the Sangha. And this counters the idea that a hierarchy is required. You don't need the hierarchy to control. If the lay people are aware of what is happening, then the funding and the support will naturally go to those people who are worthy of support. Those people who really are practicing the rules in the right way. Yeah. Why? Because you see that, and you see that around the Buddhist world all the time. Yeah. If you go to places like Thailand, who do the lay people want to support? They want to support the forest monastics. They want to support the monastics who keep their rules. They want to support the monastics who do meditation practice. Yeah. They want to support the monastics who are really wise and peaceful and all these kind of things. That is what they want to do. So this actually works. We know that from practical experience. So this is a couple of solutions to the idea of corruption. Of course, there's always going to be corruption. Not going to resolve these problems entirely. There's always going to be dodgy monastics in the world. That's just the way things are. That was the case also at the time of the Buddha. But we should not try to resolve this problem with a solution that is worse than the original problem. And that solution is the hierarchies that we have, that we see around the world. It just doesn't seem to work. Certainly not. We've gone way too far with this idea of hierarchies.
Ajahn Brahmali, there's just a comment here from the Dhammasara nuns. They're just saying, Ajahn Brahmali would do a marvelous job of teaching Vinaya for lay people. Perhaps a series of workshops. Smiley face.
Okay. Yeah. We have actually been talking about that. It's not entirely kind of unrealistic. I have actually thought about that before. So, but yeah, no, thank you for that comment. It's a good idea, and I think that it would be worthwhile. So I think, yeah, it's something we should consider. Okay. 5 minutes to 2. So let's shall we just forge ahead. Are you ready for more? Or are you feeling completely zonked out? You're right? Yeah? Okay. You still all look, none of you is asleep. That's amazing. I don't know. Well done. Okay, so let's look at the second potential problem, which is the problem of gridlock. So how can we resolve this? If there are monastics who are difficult, or we can't get decisions through, nothing really happens, the monastery stagnates, no development happens, and all of these kind of things. What are the solutions to this? So this is the first solution. You listen to what people have to say. So you have a proposal for something, say you want to build kutis or whatever. So you listen, what are the reasons why people object? And you take that on board, and then you change your proposal, or you postpone the proposal, or whatever is required to come to an agreement. We had an agreement recently about getting rid of a car. Remember that one, Venerable Metaji? So we had a car in the monastery that we were talking about getting rid of, and there were some people who didn't want to get rid of it. I can't remember who that was anymore, but there were some people who didn't want to get rid of that car. And they objected, and then we kind of, over time, it kind of resolved itself. Actually, I was the one who didn't want to get rid of the car. So I was the gridlock person. But then eventually we kind of agreed that was the right way to go anyway. So proposal is altered, or you change the frame a little bit, or some people made some nice suggestions, maybe we should get another car in its place, and these kind of things. So you find a way through this so everyone is happy. And remember that compromise is always good. Compromise is a great thing in the world, because compromise means that you have to let go a little bit. And life is really one long compromise, and it has to be that way. Why? Because every one of us looks at the world from slightly different eyes. We have slightly different perceptions of the world. We see things in a different way. It's impossible that we're going to reach agreement on everything. Compromise is the only way. And because compromise is the only way, it's something that we should be happy to let go of our own ideas and find that middle way between somebody else. It's something that is very, very useful to learn because I think it is supremely important. And I think the world of politics would learn enormously from that idea of compromising rather than sometimes there seem to always be at loggerheads. But compromise is actually something that is fundamental for an harmonious working of any kind of Buddhist institution, especially the Sangha. So this is one way of solving the potential gridlock. Yeah? And the second way is the following, and that is to ask people to go with the majority. Yeah? And we see this happening at Bodhinyana Monastery, and you see that there is one person who is objects to a proposal a lot, and then there comes a point where Ajahn Brahmali will say to them, well, okay, I understand that you are opposed to this, but are you willing to go with the majority out of respect for the majority? Yeah? There comes a point when there's nothing more to be had in terms of compromise. Their obvious objections have been taken on board. So are you willing to go with the majority? And 9 out of 10 times they will say, yes, I'm happy to go with the majority. Sometimes they may not. Okay, in that case, you can't make a decision. But usually they are. So if you have a community of mature people who understand their responsibility in getting things done, then these things will normally work out. The potential for gridlock can be reduced dramatically, I think. It needs to be said that this is particularly so in a community where you have a person with a lot of authority like Ajahn Brahmali. That certainly helps because people tend to listen to Ajahn Brahmali. If we had someone else in charge, it probably may not have worked so well. But it shows that it's in principle that these things can be done.
Just to be clear for the nuns,
when
that happens to us, someone might have said, I wanted to abstain, and then they're asked, would you stand in the way of the decision? And they say no. So it kind of swings back to unanimity.
Well, abstaining is not really a problem in Sangha Karma. You can't. Abstaining doesn't block the proposal anyway. It's only if you actively are against it that it blocks it. Okay, we only have 1 or 2 minutes before the tea is supposed to happen. So, are there any last comments? Any more comments? Not last, but kind of moving on. Venerable.
Do you feel like that these kind of decisions are made more often and we're more weighed down by them now than, say, what would have happened in the Buddhist time and the early times? Because, we have so many more assets, I guess, for the monasteries. I mean, the kind of things they talk about in the Vinaya, they're such small things, whereas now we're dealing with, I guess, more requirements, more infrastructure, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we live in a much more complicated society in general, in terms of laws and regulations and in terms of what we own and what we have, and so many areas where it's much more complicated. And so there probably is, as you say, there's more scope for Sangha Karma because of that, and because we have all of these things. I think that's probably true. In those days, it probably was reasonably simple, although, So in those days, it tended to be, if you're going to, the kind of offices you had was like distributing robes, that kind of stuff. It was very kind of, innocuous compared to what we're dealing with now. That was more like distributing cars, that kind of thing. So, well, that's not.
Wi-Fi,
Right, exactly. All these kind of things that make life very complicated. Yeah, but I think that's true. And so it is. But this is kind of nice. Yeah, it means that we have to learn to adapt the Vinaya to our times. And I think that's quite nice. It makes you think and understand what's going on much better if you're forced to adapt it and use it in a good way. Yeah.
So, there's a comment that's been provided from the nuns at Dhammasara, kind of just I think it's basically just a general comment, and they're saying it kind of ties into some of the discussions that were took place yesterday about communications, saying that the comment is that one of my fellow monastics suggests that the main issue is about creating supportive environments so that participation is encouraged. So people are made more important than efficiency, because the whole idea of democracy is that it's participatory. If people are shy or hesitant to participate, it doesn't work. That's the comment.
Yeah, that's a very good comment. You need to make an environment where people feel safe in speaking up. You need to feel that you won't get sanctioned if you speak up, and if you speak up, then the evil senior monks or will go after you and kind of give you a hard time, something like that. And if you feel that, and I think that is the case in many monasteries, I don't think we should kind of hide that you actually feel shy about speaking up because you know it will have consequences, you know. Usually speaking up does have consequences in the world. If you speak up at the wrong time, someone will sanction you and they can give you a hard time. That's the way it is. And I must admit, this is one of the things I find really nice about someone like Ajahn Brahm, is that Ajahn Brahm, he never holds any grudges, he never treats you badly because you speak up or anything like that. He's one of the most amazing people in that sense. And if I think back over my 25 years, I don't know how many times I've been rude to Ajahn Brahm. Probably I don't even want to think about it. But I've said things that I think in retrospect, why on earth I shouldn't say this kind of things, you know, I'm just being too direct or whatever. But he never holds on to anything. He lets go straight away. And it's kind of beautiful with most people in the world. They would hold on to those things and it will have repercussions for you later on if you are not, you know, if you say things in the wrong way or whatever. So that idea of kindness and compassion and understanding that we all have defilements and we all have problems. And when we speak, it is not because we want to be evil. Maybe but usually we don't want to be evil. But it's just our, you know, things coming out because this is how we are built. And then you have compassion for people and you allow them that ability to speak out a little bit. I think this is so important. Otherwise, you end up with a oppressed kind of Sangha where people feel oppressed. They feel that they are not able to kind of just be themselves and bring things up. That's a very important point. May have an environment that is conducive to speaking about things really matters enormously. So are we going to have a cup of tea, Mataji? Yeah? Are we moving over to the... Yeah? Okay. How long a break do people want to have? What is it, 20 minutes, half an hour? 20 minutes might be sufficient. I mean, it's the last session then. Okay, 20 minutes. So let's come back in 20 minutes. So, yeah. So, 2:25? 2:25. Yeah.
Oh, there's someone else here. Tantik.
He used to be the president in 2015.
Oh, that's nice.
Dan.
Okay, I got the wrong way around.
That's okay. We might be the ones in the wrong. Crown jewels.
Teddy bears. Is that what's showing now on the everywhere? Yeah, teddy bears. It looks like they're having a discussion, doesn't it? Yeah, it looks exactly like that. Oh, dear. It's not the Sangha. Ghana. Yeah. Ghana Kama. Is it? Mm. All right. All right. All right. How come it isn't showing up? This is the. Should I go out of this one first and reconnect it, or? Oh, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, it's running.
Is it running? Okay, so it should be all right. All right.
How do you start the presentation?
That's already. This is it, really. I'll restart it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, that's maybe the way to go.
No.
Just go out of it for a second and go back in again, see what happens. So this is the actual thing, yeah. I don't know if it makes any difference if we go in and out of this. Yeah, there we are. Okay. Oh no, that shows the other way around. It's the reverse of what it's supposed to be. This is supposed to be my view. That's supposed to be on there. Don't show this.
I don't know this.
So just no. I think it will happen if I go into the other one. Maybe it will reverse it again. So let's see what happens. Presenter's view. How come it doesn't come up? Oh, show presenter's view. It doesn't come up in this one. No, it comes up there. It's a weird. Ah. Ha. Well done. Excellent. Swap around. Okay. So, any more questions on this before we move forward? Have you lost one venerable? He's had enough? Is he? Okay, he can just, okay. So shall we just forge ahead?
Would you say that community meetings were kind of really important on a regular basis, and in that sense that might lead to less Sangha karmas, or having people more in tune harmony aspect really being the bulk of what the Sangha Karma is about?
I don't think having a lot of meetings necessarily is a good idea because I don't know. I have found that human beings are really good at making up stuff if there is room for it. And community meetings can be endless. And I think this is one of the problems. You need to have some kind of lid on community meetings. And that's why I think the idea of having it once a fortnight with a Patimokkha is great, because there is that limit on things. And if there are any other issues, we'll talk about it more, informally between each other and try to resolve it that way, and then bring up whatever is left for the community meetings. That's what I would, personally, what I feel. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a bit of a balance. Because we were discussing our discussion group, we were in Chenrezig Institute. I think it was when the beginning of COVID, a lot of things fell apart across the institute when we went into lockdown. A little bit different to situation. And we didn't have meetings for a long time. And so that became a problem in itself. So, yeah. So I think, finding the balance where it doesn't go too long.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're saying that it's important to find a balance, not to go too long between meetings. And I think that's very, very right. And that is why our system of having it every fortnight with Patimokkha is actually very useful, because then you have a kind of structure behind those things. And you know when the meetings are going to be, so it's kind of handy. Yeah. That was only very short time we did it with Bridge Patimokkha for. And I think then we did it very fast, and we just kind of had a quick meeting here. But I think it became clear very soon that if you are part of the same household, you can actually have meetings here, no problem. Then it was kind of the issue was finished. Yeah. I can barely remember that. Wow, I can't. Maybe you can remember that. I have to yeah. Okay, so let's move on to problem number 3 here, which is as follows. It is the idea that it is an ineffective, cumbersome, and time-consuming way to make decisions through Sangha Karma. And there is some truth to that. So how can we overcome this problem? So the first solution is a solution of delegation of authority. This is a solution that you find in the Vinaya itself. And this is the idea whereby you give someone an office in the Sangha. Yeah, there's lots of these offices in the Sangha. Some of them are really obscure and a bit strange, don't really fit our modern idea, but it gives a general idea how to run Sangha. And when you delegate authority, it basically means that the Sangha then can leave that whole area aside. It doesn't have to kind of deal with all the minutiae of daily life, how the Sangha operates. So here is an example of how this is presented in the Vinaya. Yeah? So this was a time when there was all kind of robes coming to the monastery, and then that robe had to be shared out. Yeah, so this is how the story goes. Soon afterwards, there was a racket as the Sangha was sharing out robe cloth. Yeah, there was no one in charge of the robe cloth, so kind of all the monks kind of got together, and it was kind of just complete chaos, probably. And then the Buddha says, you should appoint a monk or a nun. There's always a monk in the Vinaya, but a nun is kind of implied, who has 5 qualities as the distributor of robe cloth, yeah, to avoid the racket and the problems. So it's always in response to a problem in the Sangha. And what are those 5? He or she is not swayed by desire, ill will, confusion, fear, and he or she knows what has and has not been distributed. So you have an overview of what's happening in the Sangha. So this is an example. Yeah, there is a problem to be solved. There is an issue in the Sangha. Whenever we have something that needs to be resolved, then you can create an office for a person like that. So in our monastery, we have a lot of unofficial posts, actually. Car monk. Yeah, we have, we certainly have stores, but these are kind of more officially sanctioned. Yeah, so we have the stores monk, sure, we have that. Work monk, we have. I know that. And then you can really create positions wherever you feel it is required in the monastery. And you should be careful that the person is suitable. Yeah, and these are kind of the requirements. You should be an even-handed person who deals with people not on basis of defilements, on the basis of what is fair and reasonable. That's really what it comes down to. And then the story goes on. It's not really, it doesn't stop there. And the rest of the story typically goes like this. The monks who were distributors of robe cloth thought, how should we distribute the robe cloth? Is there any method to doing this? Is it just random? Do we just kind of, here's a robe for you, here's a robe for you? Or is there a kind of a method for this? And then always the Buddha has to answer all these questions. I don't know how he coped with it all. I feel a bit sorry for him sometimes, but this is what he responded. You should first sort the cloth, estimate its value, followed by marking portions of equal value, counting the monks, gathering the monks into groups, and finally fixing the shares of robe cloth. I had a really hard time translating this because the Pali was really obscure, but that's a rough estimation of what the Pali means. So the idea here is that the Sangha creates the parameters for the person who is the official. So you say to someone, you are the official, and you are in charge of stores. And if you don't give any parameters, it means the storeman can do whatever they want, basically. They're in charge within the Vinaya, of course. So in our monastery, if you are the store monks, you have very free hands in our monastery. If you want to give things away to a charity, you give things away to a charity. Usually the way our monastery works, if you're the store monk, if someone needs something, you say, okay, here's the key, go and help yourself in the store. That's usually how it works, because the store monk is just couldn't really be bothered to check it out. Well, sometimes that's how it works, not always. And so it is then up to the store monk to run the stores as that person sees fit, whatever that means. And my personal opinion is it's really useful to give that person as free reins as they possibly can, because that means there's less work for the Sangha if the person who is in charge kind of can do whatever they want. They don't have to be so worried about things. That's usually how things we try to run things. Giving people full responsibility. There's no need to oversee people. Monks are generally, and I'm sure the same is true with nuns, generally very reliable people. You can trust them to do the right thing. If they happen to do the wrong thing, well, then you bring it up in the Sangha meeting, and then maybe you give some restrictions. But generally speaking, you can trust monastics. They will live up to their expectations of doing the right thing. And that's wonderful. It's beautiful. And sometimes when you give people the trust, they live up to it. If you treat people like a crook, they will live up to being a crook. That's how people often are. We live up to the expectations around us. If you treat people with kindness and with a sense of trust, they actually tend to live up to that trust. So this is what we do. So you delegate the authority, and if necessary, you place restrictions on how they do things. Am I painting? Is that a reasonable thing? This is roughly how we do things at Bodhinana? Or am I kind of painting a glorified picture of how we do things? I tend to.
I think the monks who have delegated authority develop their own routines. So they do probably have a bit more structure than you would see. So the last store monk wouldn't give out the key. He would go and get something for you.
Okay.
And they're concerned that they know what qualities are there. The other monks, the office monk, the finance monk, they work in parameters set by Ajahn Brahmali. And that relationship really needs to work with you and with Ajahn Brahmali, and the seniors. So we may not see a lot of that, but you don't complain. So, it seems to work fine.
Yeah, good. No, that's exactly how it should work. You set your own parameters. What do you feel is appropriate? That's great. I think that's really, really marvelous. And sometimes if you are the store monk, you want to give an extra service. I go to a Muslim and say, I need a lower robe. Would you mind looking? Oh, no, I'd be very happy to look one for you. And he goes and he finds a nice one for me, and I have a lower robe. So it's kind of some of that service also is an opportunity. So, yes.
Where there are already procedures in the Vinaya, like this example here, if there's something more practical for the community, is there a way to adapt the procedure?
I don't think you have to follow this procedure because Yeah, because things have changed so much. And I think that all the minor rules in the Vinaya, they are rules that, if you go to the Sekas, this is one of the things I always like to quote because it's so obvious. For the Sekas, it's only an offense if you do it out of disrespect. But if you do it because you have a good reason, it's fine to not follow those rules. So these are minor rules on par with the Sekas. So yeah.
So like dividing up the Katina stuff, for example,
equally.
I think that's a for example, because this is pretty much the phrase from the Katina, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how would you do it otherwise with the Katina cloth?
Down the line?
Down the line, yeah. I think that in that case I would keep it. I would. I mean, I think it should be fair.
There's so much stuff. We're going to go down the line or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I suppose distribution happens.
Yeah. I mean, we barely bother with the Katina stuff anymore because, as you said, there's so much you don't really need to do it. So, what often happens is you can say at the beginning, I take my share, and I give it back to the stores, and then it kind of becomes for everyone. That's an easy way of doing it.
I mean, I was looking at this with one of the stores and Katina last year, where we were getting ready for Katina. And we're like, what do we have to do? We have to get 16 washing baskets and dump everything into 16 washing baskets so people can see what their share is. And we're like, this is doing our head. We're just going to do it down the line.
That's it. That's too much. I would. What we have traditionally done in our monastery, I don't know if it's done anymore, because I'm not really following what's happening, is to put everything in one place for the Katina. It's all in one place at least, and then they can be distributed down the track. But the reality is that it never is distributed in that way anyway. So I just put everything in one big pile from Katina, and then if anyone wants anything down the track, then you can distribute it. But usually it doesn't happen anyway. So,
but not in distribution time,
Well, it's up to you. You can if you want to, but usually there is no requirement. No one wants any of that stuff, because you have what you need already. And if there is someone who wants it, well, then they can take that share. So you just go to the store now and ask. But I think in that case, it is useful to distribute it equally. I don't think sending that down the line, that becomes too kind of hierarchical again, in my opinion. It's nice to have that equality.
Maximum of this item, based on, if you've got 16 and the maximum of this item, you get 1 per person, but then it runs down the line, so you can relinquish that share. I guess is what I think we went with. I can't remember now. But it's like, if we got 30 or something and there were 12 of us who finished, then we're like, okay, get it out. The most you can take is 2, but you don't have to take 2.
Okay.
So it's down the line-ish.
I see. Okay. All right. Yep.
Excuse me, I'm Ajahn Brahmali. There's a question from the Dhammasara nuns. They just missed something you were saying about a particular kind of rule that you're saying you don't think it needs to be kept. They're kind of like minor rules, like the Sakyas. Yeah, I think she didn't quite catch that, or she'd just come back or something, so she didn't hear it.
Okay, I was just saying that the Sakya rules are the kind of smallest rules in the Patimokkha, and they, you only if you don't keep them out of disrespect, that's the only time you have an offense. And because they are Patimokkha rules, I would say all the rules in the Kandakas that are outside the Patimokkha altogether, that are often called Dukkata rules, they are even less, if anything, than the Sakya rules, even less important. So I would say they are of the same category. They are rules that you don't have to keep if there is a good reason for it. But if you don't keep it simply because you think something disrespectful about the rule, I hate that rule, whatever, I'm not going to keep it, then of course you have a problem.
Okay.
Yeah. But there should be a kind of a reasonable reason. A lot of these rules are, were laid down for a good reason. So anyway, and just to add a little bit more, and the monks who were distributors of robe cloth thought, what share of the robe cloth should we give to the novices? Another kind of important point. And the Buddha replies, I allow you to give half a share to the novices. Maybe that should be, you should give half a share. Maybe that's better. Because I allow you doesn't really kind of, okay, whatever, allow, okay, what does that mean? You should give half a share, maybe better. This is one of these words that's very hard to translate. It's called anujanati. I mean, it usually means I allow, but the context often means this is what you should be doing. So just, again, the idea of setting limits on these things and setting kind of giving the office holders parameters within which to act. Okay, I want to come to the solution number 2. Yeah, so this is how to make these decisions more workable, so they don't kind of become, really cumbersome and difficult. And this is the first one: delegation of authority, and setting rules for those delegated authority officers. And the second solution is the following, and this is what you can call inherent or charismatic authority of certain individuals. And this is what I mean when I say that Ajahn Brahmali carries a lot of authority in the Sangha at Bodhinyana, because he has what you might call this inherent authority. Someone who is very virtuous, someone who has the qualities you would expect of a very good monastic, and automatically he carries a lot of weight in the Sangha meeting, and people will tend to go with him because we trust him. We trust him in a very deep sense, much more than we trust any person in the world. And so you tend to go with what he says. It doesn't mean that you always go with what he says. It doesn't mean that you never challenge him. This is the nice thing about Ajahn Brahmali. You can challenge him. But it means that he has a certain weight about him. So what does this mean? And this is kind of a definition, and it will be interesting to see where this definition comes from. But this is the definition of this. Inherent authority is where a person clearly merits authority due to their superior knowledge and exceptional abilities. In the Buddha Sangha, the elders in the monastery, monks and nuns who have been ordained for many years, have inherent authority due to their greater experience. Sometimes, not always maybe, not always true. I mean, you read in the Vinaya, you read about people who were Theras, who were 10 years and more, who were still considered incompetent fools. And if you are still an incompetent fool, it means that you do not gain that seniority, privileges that you might call it, or whatever you want to call it, authority, because you don't really know what's going on. And this comes up in the Vinaya. For example, if you are 10 reins, then you can become an acharya. You can actually ordain people, and you can become a teacher of people under you, but not if you are an incompetent fool. That's literally what it says, because then you don't have those abilities. So this is true, but within boundaries. So you have to assess people to some extent, whether they know what's going on or not. But this is where Venerable Karunika was mentioning before, about where do this idea of respect for elders, how does that fit with the idea of democracy? And this is part of that, is the inherent authority of certain people due to their character, basically. Also, learned monks and nuns and those with attainments in deep meditation or enlightenment, awakening, have inherent authority due to their personal accomplishments. And it's taken from a book called Good Governance by Ajahn Brahmali. It's kind of interesting. But the ideas behind this are actually ideas that you find also in sociological literature. I'm quoting Max Weber there. Max Weber, probably considered one of the greatest sociologists in modern times. He's a very, very famous German sociologist. And he has similar ideas. He calls it charismatic authority. Ajahn Brahmali calls it inherent authority. But the ideas are very similar on where authority comes from. And and here we come, one of the points here, which is very controversial, is the idea that you have authority due to your attainments of deep meditation or awakening. This is actually very controversial, because how do we know who has deep meditation? How do we know who is enlightened? And this is notoriously difficult to ascertain. Really, really hard to ascertain. And sometimes people who we think are enlightened turn out to be some of the worst scallywags imaginable. We have all seen this in the history of Buddhism, and certainly in the 20th century, and now also into the 21st, the contemporary history of Buddhism, how people who have been considered by many to be awakened masters turn out to be serial abusers of people. And so this is an area where we have to be very, very careful, and where we should actually judge not people's enlightenment first and accept their conduct as a consequence of that. No, we should judge someone's enlightenment by their conduct. Conduct is the critical thing which decides someone's awakening. If you are an awakened person, you don't abuse other people. If you are awakened, you don't hit people. You don't verbally abuse them. You are kind. You are caring. This is kind of the definition of awakening, that you're kind and caring. If you're not kind and caring, and if you say, this is good for your awakening, I abuse you, that's good for your awakening, that's crazy stuff. That's really crazy wisdom. And crazy wisdom is not wisdom, it's just crazy. That's the problem with crazy wisdom. So an enlightened person should live the outcome or live the consequences of that awakening, which is an abolishment of all defilements. And if you have abolished all defilements, you're going to be kind. That's the nature of what happens when you abolish the defilements. So we have to be very careful in this area and understand these things in the right way. Otherwise, we have a big problem. And a lot of the problem in the Buddhist world comes from that kind of thing, the absolute conviction that someone is awakened, and then accepting the abuse. I remember we had a monk at our monastery before. He shall remain nameless because some of you will know who it is. And I remember him saying, there was one famous teacher in Thailand, and he used to punch people. And he said, wow, this guy is so enlightened. He's so wise. He can punch people. It's really it's really good stuff when he punches people. And I thought, what are you talking about? That's crazy stuff. And so this is the kind of thing that I mean when you excuse the inexcusable because you have some kind of preconceived idea that someone is awakened or whatever. That is not the right way of thinking about this path. Still, there is clearly inherent authority, but we have to be careful with this kind of authority because it can really get out of hand sometimes.
Excuse me, Ajahn Brahmali, just before it gets too off topic, there was another follow-up question from the nuns at Dhammasara asking, it was about that, what you were saying about the Sakyas and the rules and the Kandikas, how it's only an offense if you're doing something out of disrespect. Yeah. And so the follow-up question is about saying, does that then mean that, all the stuff you're covering today doesn't need to be kept as well? That's the question.
Not really, because many of the things we have been covering today are about Sangha Kamma. Now, Sangha Kamma is not really about minor rules. Sangha Kamma is about the functioning of the Sangha, and it's not really a rule for individual monastics as a rule of governance for the Sangha as a whole. That's quite different, and I think that of course, we need to do this thing because this is kind of how we are told to govern things. In any case, it is not something that is outdated. It is not something that doesn't make any sense in our modern society. When I say about things, you don't keep things because they are out of disrespect. What I'm talking about is things like, well, you have to, the other person should stand while you're sitting. If you give a Dhamma talk, for example, that is one of the Sekya rules. You should not be standing when someone else is sitting and give them a teaching, because then that's against the Sekyas. But that is where in a modern situation, if you stand in a lecture theater and you stand at the lectern and the audience is sitting, it is not considered disrespectful to the speaker because everyone else is sitting. This is a standard way of doing things. And that's what I mean when the culture has changed so that the way we treat each other, what is considered respectful or not, has changed. And this is the same thing with all the Khandaka sections. And of course, when it comes to Sangha Kamma, Sangha Kamma is precisely about things that we should respect because it is just as valuable now as it was then. There's no reason why this is no longer applicable. In fact, it's maybe in many ways, just as applicable as it was then. So it is really about rules that are, kind of lost their meaning or are completely, irrelevant or are counter to modern values or whatever. Rules of kind of politeness, for example, that, society then was very different from what it is now. So it is a different ideas of politeness, etc. Okay, so that is the second solution to the problem of Sangha Kamma being cumbersome and difficult, that there is a certain inherent authority, and that often cuts through the problem. Ajahn Brahmali says, let's do it like this, and everyone says, yay, and then there's no problem anymore. The third solution to this problem is as follows. Monasticism is about spiritual practice, not achieving practical solution at all costs. And we mentioned this before. I think this is a very important point. And spiritual practice, one of the most important aspects of that is the idea of being in harmony, because spiritual life and achievements and moving forward on the path often relies on that harmony in the Sangha. In a Sangha where there's disharmony, in a Sangha where the monks are fighting with monks and nuns fighting with nuns or whatever, it's almost impossible to have any peace of mind. You go back to Kuti and these things churn around in your head, and you can't really be peaceful. It's very, very disruptive when the Sangha is not in harmony. So we should always put spiritual practice, spiritual values above practical solutions. So what is a harmonious assembly? And here is one of the beautiful suttas from the Anguttara Nikaya talks about this. It's an assembly where the mendicants live in harmony, appreciating each other without quarreling, blending like milk and water, and regarding each other with kindly eyes. This is the idea of harmony. This is a high degree of harmony. You okay? Yeah. So this is the idea of harmony in the Sangha. And then the Buddha says, when the mendicants live in harmony like this, they make much merit. This is already quite interesting, that you make merit. But of course, the implication is that if you don't live in harmony, you might be making demerit. That's kind of the implications here. But the very fact that your ability to treat your fellow monastics with kindness and care and understanding and developing harmony in the Sangha actually is a basis for merit. You can see there is a fine line here. There's a fine line between bringing up issues and dealing with them and staying in harmony. And this needs to be balanced. So when you do bring up things, you need to do it in such a way you don't disrupt the harmony in the monastery. So you have to this takes quite a lot of good judgment to be able to do this in the right way. So you make merit by being in harmony, and at that time the mendicants live in a holy dwelling. That is the heart's release by rejoicing. This is the mudita. So the mudita cheta vimutti or something like that. And of course, when you have this heart's release by rejoicing, this happens. When you're joyful, rapture springs up. When your mind is full of rapture, the body becomes tranquil. The body is tranquil, you feel bliss, sukhang, patisangvedi. And when you're blissful, the mind becomes still. You achieve samadhi. And of course, samadhi is precisely one of the fundamental things that we're trying to achieve in monastic life. So monastic life works because of harmony. When we treat each other well, when we work together in this way. Disharmony does the opposite. Disharmony stops you from achieving the results of the monastic life. It's very powerful things. And so this reminds you that more important than getting things done, getting things right, maybe sacrificing the harmony for practical solutions is madness, because the whole purpose of the monastic life is undermined if we do that. That's the third thing, to remember that in the end, it is about spiritual practice and not about practical solutions. It's a very important point, I think. So, what do people think? Do they have any thoughts? While you have? Please, in the book. Yeah.
I was just going to say that sometimes you can have harmony just by letting people feel listened to. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to discuss everything and come to a solution, even if they can just feel heard, and that is harmony.
Yeah, it's a good point. To having a chance to at least be heard. Yeah.
And most of the time people fall between, somewhere in between being incompetent idiots and Ajahn Brahmali, like the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So, I think that there is still this risk of people being led astray by idea or desire or whatever it is. I mean, because whenever there's this inherent authority, then there's a potential for them to be corrupted or also feel a level of pressure to perform in a certain way as well, which can also be around. Yeah.
So I think the most important thing that at least people are do their best, and they are aware of the problem, and they kind of try to avoid it as much as they can. If they're doing that much, at least they're doing really well already. But if they are kind of are using the office to get their way, then that would be really, really bad news. So I agree with you. We shouldn't expect perfection. We should expect at least people are open to, or they are kind of aware of the potential, and they try to avoid it at the very least. Yeah.
It can be a slippery slope. I mean, it's just through no fault of their own. You can just slip into this, right? Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yes. Maybe, but then that's a good opportunity for the Sangha to say, well, is this the right way? Are you sure this is the best way of doing it? Hint, hint. I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's true. So, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a practice, though, right? I mean, this is kind of the potential is always there, even if you are not the storm monk or storm nun. The potential is always to go backwards. So, I mean, one of the important things in monastic life is that you're always trying your very best to move forward and trying your very best to see where your weaknesses are and actually doing something about it. And if you have that integrity that you are doing that, well, then you are, worthy of trust, and you're worthy of at least given the opportunity. But in the end, we all have to have that willingness and to kind of move forward. Otherwise, it's not gonna. It's going to be hopeless.
Ajahn, the solutions that you propose here and the Sangha karmas, how far should that encompass lay people staying in the monastery or lay people in the world, such as, BSWA? So in the present settings, we have multiple interdependencies. So would you say it should just ring circle the Sangha, or do you have to see the interdependencies as well?
Well, I think, in the it's hard enough sometimes to get this done in the Sangha itself properly, and I think we should focus on the Sangha, what we can do. And of course, in an ideal world, we try to bring it into other organizations as well. And I have always been of the opinion that ideally the committee of the Buddha Society also works on principles of unanimity. I think that would be great, so that the Sangha Karma ideals are brought in there. But I think there's always going to have to be compromises, and I think with the lay world, okay. In the end, it's blooming hard enough to run a monastery and to kind of get our things right, not to involve the Buddha Society as well. So knowing your limitations. I'm involved right now with drawing up a constitution for a monastery in Poland, and one of the things I want to do there is to separate the Sangha as much as possible from the lay organization, because I can see the problems and how hard it is to actually run large organizations, how involved Ajahn Brahmali is, and in fact not only Ajahn, yourself, for goodness sake, myself also to some large extent, and how it kind of saps your energy and takes away from the monastic life, being involved with all of these lay organizations. So I'm for more and more separation, to be honest. And if they want advice on how they should do things, okay, we say, well, this is the way we do it as monks. Maybe we should try the same way at BSWA or whatever. Yeah. Okay, shall we just forge ahead? We can, maybe, I'm not sure if should we... I don't know how long this is going to take to finish off. Probably, maybe not that long. Should we have another breakout session, or should we just carry on? Carry on, yeah. We can have maybe a discussion at the very end if we have time or something. Yeah, whatever. Is everyone else okay with that, or Sangha Karma? Or do you want to have another discussion session? Keep going. Yeah. Okay, we'll keep going. So the next question we have now, what we have looked at so far is Sangha Karma as it is explained in the Vinaya. And Sangha Karma in the Vinaya is always given for specific situations that need to be resolved. Yeah, the electing a community official, ordination ceremony, danda karmas, which are like punishment actions and all these kind of things. They're very specific situations. And of course, many situations that we have to deal with are not laid down in the Vinaya as such. So the question is, when can Sangha Kamma be used? It's one of these questions that we come up against, and we need some kind of guidance in this. Is it only when things are laid down by the Buddha, as I've seen, or can it also be used at other times? And the answer to this is that it's partly found in the Kandakas, in Kandaka 21, which is the Kandaka on the first council after the Buddha passed away. And this is what happened at that council. Yeah? This is after the Buddha passed away. This is a situation that was not anticipated by the Buddha. What do? They have a Sangha Kamma. Yeah? This is the Sangha Kamma. Please, I ask the Sangha to listen. If it seems appropriate to the Sangha should appoint these 500 monks to spend the rainy season at Rajagaha and to recite the teaching and the monastic law together there. No other monk should enter the rainy season residence at Rajagaha. This is the motion. And then there is the announcement afterwards. So this is obviously after the Buddha passed away. The Buddha never made a Sangha Kamma for this, because this is a unique situation that only occurs after the Buddha has passed away. And lo and behold, they do a Sangha Kamma, yeah, not the Duttiya Kamma. One motion and one announcement. So what this seems to suggest is that Sangha Kamma is not limited to what was laid down by the Buddha, but in fact it should be used in all situations where the Sangha is making a decision of any kind. So this is where I get this idea from, that Sangha Kamma should be broadened out and should be used as a general decision-making tool within the Sangha, because there is precedence for that. Then comes the other question. We have already discussed this a little bit before. So we agree that there is Sangha Kamma can be done for all decisions of the Sangha. Well, if that is the case, what kind of Sangha Kamma should be used? Yeah, so we have, as I mentioned before, there's 4 kinds of Sangha Kamma mentioned in the Vinaya. There is what is called Nyati Chatutta Kamma. Nyati Chatutta means Nyati, the motion, and 3 announcements. Nyati Chatutta Kamma means literally Sangha Kamma with the Nyati as the motion as the 4th. Chatutta is 4th. So there's that one. There's not the Duttiya Kamma, 1 motion, 1 announcement. There's the Nyati Kamma, just the motion. And there's the Apalokana Kamma, which I mentioned before, which is just asking for permission from the Sangha to do something. These are the 4. So what should we use? Yeah, which ones of these should we use? So this is my conclusion. Yeah, judging from the same passage that we just saw now, and the prevalence in the suttas, it should be the Nyati Duttiya Kamma, the motion and 1 announcement. That is the one that is most commonly used. This is what you see in the suttas far more often than anyone else. This is the Sangha Kamma, which is a standard Sangha Kamma. Only very important Sangha Kammas use the idea of motion and 3 announcements. And the lesser Sangha Kammas, the Nyati and the Apalokana Kamma, are actually quite marginal in the suttas. So this is, I think, the ideal one, especially for decisions that kind of carry some weight. Yeah, we're going to build 6 more kutis at Hermit Hill. Well, it may not look like we're going to be building any more kutis, but who knows what's going to happen. But if we're going to do, that should, in my opinion, probably be a motion and 1 announcement, because it is an important one. And then we should write it down in our Sangha Kamma book, and we should kind of make clear that this has been decided by the Sangha. So this is what I would recommend. Very commonly around the world, the Sangha Kamma is much more informal. And an informal Sangha Kamma is what you would call an Apalokana Kamma. And the problem with the Apalokana Kamma, it is very poorly defined. So exactly what does it mean to ask for permission from the Sangha? Does it mean you just kind of sit in the Dana Sala, you look around and say, yeah, does anyone agree with this? And there's people, yeah, okay, whatever. And kind of, that's the Apalokana Kamma, very kind of informal. Or exactly where are the limits? And I haven't really researched this topic properly. I don't know what the commentaries say about this. But I think what they say is that the minimum requirements for Sangha Kamma need to be met with Apalokana Kamma as well, which means that actually it is not that different from the Nyatidutiya Kamma. It's actually very similar in many ways. So, I don't know what the answer is to that one. But, yeah.
Ajahn, there's a question here from the Dhammasara nuns. May I read that out?
Please. Yep.
Okay. So it goes. Part of the motivation for my question is that at some point today, Ajahn said that performing Sangha Karma is relatively recent at Bodhinyana also, due to the influence of Thai tradition, and also Venerable Karunika's comment about these things being discussed for decades, but not being practiced. So I wanted to ask, in moving towards actually doing more Sangha Karma, the most important thing is not whether it's a formal Sangha Karma or an informal meeting or whatever, rather that we foster communication that is kind, caring, and inclusive. So this ties in with what Ajahn saying now about placing spiritual values over practical ones, or as Ajahn Brahmali might say, putting people over things, or efficiency. Because spiritual values are making kind speech, etc. more important than achieving a particular outcome. I mean, practicing right speech is also a spiritual value. What do you think? Sometimes the idea of putting spiritual values over practical ones can cause people to feel that they should not speak up, when actually speaking up is part of right intention and right speech, and therefore is about cultivating right view. And so then speaking up is sometimes a spiritual value. If you know where you are coming from, and it's from right motivation, and it also helps build a harmonious community that builds itself upon right speech and kindness, then maybe that's a good thing. It depends on people's motivations, doesn't it?
Yes. I agree. I think I think it's very true, and I agree with that. And I think that bringing up issues when there is a need to bring things up, I absolutely agree. It is right speech because you're trying to safeguard the community, trying to do the right thing. And just remaining quiet to kind of preserve a kind of artificial harmony, which is not really harmony at all, because deeper down there are all kinds of issues that remain unresolved. That's not really harmony. Harmony is when you feel at ease, when you feel relaxed, and you can carry on and you don't have any issues anymore. But if you kind of hush things up out of a false sense of harmony, I don't think that is a good thing either. So it is exactly what you say, coming from a good place, deriving your speech from good motivations and all of these kind of things. I think that's exactly what I think you understand these things really well, actually. So I fully agree with you. And you have a whole essay there to can use. So that's great. Yes. They have. Actually, it's not that new, but we have never been super consistent about it and super kind of rigorous about how to use it. But I remember using Sangha Kammas for community officials going back a long way. And I remember pushing it with Ajahn Brahmali, actually, maybe already when I was a Majjhima monk, so probably maybe 20 years ago, maybe already. So we have been doing it for a while. But I think it is quite unique to Bodhinyana Monastery. I don't think it happens many places, as far as I know. I'm not sure. I can't really say that. So the question then is, I suppose, to what extent do we need? It's more important that people are included and that we have discussions and that we have a sense of everyone feeling heard. That is more important than getting the formalities right. And yes, I think there's probably some truth to that. It's important for everyone to feel included and the formalities are not so important. On the other hand, if you follow the formalities, then you feel quite sure that you have done the right thing, and you feel that the validity of what you have done is, is kind of, it's fine. So I think sometimes it can be useful to have a bit of formality as well. So if you can combine the idea of having a bit of formality with having everyone have a say, I think that may be ideal. That's why at Bodhinyana we write down the Sangha Kammas, because once you write it down, then you know that this has been done, and you feel kind of that, okay, we have made a decision, everyone has agreed on that. So I think a bit of both is probably not a bad idea.
Is it just the Sangha Kammas that you document, or do you document the whole meeting?
We only document the Sangha Kammas. Yeah.